Hello, everyone. I'm Nick with Mysterious Galaxy, the director of events for the store. I am pleased to be back with another virtual event. Let's all give a big hello to Sim, Kern, and Avi Silver. Hello! Sim Kern is a Gulf Coast author and environmental journalist writing about climate change, queer identity, and social justice. Their debut horror novel, Depart, was selected for the honor list for the 2020 Otherwise Award. Seeds for the Swarm, which is the book that we are here for today. I hope everyone has their covers. Um, is of course out. But also later in the year, they're going to have their novel, The Free People's Village, which will be published with Levine Querido. In conversation, we have Avi Silver, a speculative fiction author, the co-editor-in-chief of Augur magazine, and a poet with an honorable mention from the Riesling Awards. You can find their short fiction In Common Bonds, an aromantic speculative anthology, and Nothing Without Us Two. If you would like to purchase any of Sim's or Avi's books, you'll notice, if you're watching this live, by the way, you'll notice there's a link below. They'll take you to our event page where you can purchase their books, because not only do purchasing the books support these wonderful authors, but also supports us to keep doing wonderful events like this. And lastly, if you would like to ask any questions of Sim or Avi, there's another link that says ask a question. I wonder what that does. You can submit your question and it'll be asked later on in the program. All right, I'm going to go ahead and depart. And I'll see everyone later.
Hi. Hello, Sim. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thanks so much for talking with me, Avi.
Yeah, I'm so excited to chat. I've been reading Seeds for the Swarm for the past week, and I'm just losing it. So I'm so excited to chat and pick your brain a little bit. Um, I would love to just kind of dive right in. Did you want to do a little brief pitch of books before we jump in with questions, or would you rather have it kind of unravel naturally?
I guess maybe we should just yeah, do you want to pitch it or you want me to pitch it?
I want you to do it. You wrote it. You know it best.
Seeds for the Swarm is a young adult science fiction dystopia book. It's set in 2075, and it follows Rilla McCracken, who goes to this sort of elite school where kids are tasked with finding a way to save the world from all the ravages of climate change. But she and her friends, a little found family of college kids, end up realizing that some of the school's billionaire backers may have their own nefarious purposes, and using sort of this technology that they're developing to fight back.
Amazing. Thank you. And on my end, I'm going to be talking a little about things coming up. I have Two Dark Moons and Three Seeking Stars, the first two book in the Sami Cycle trilogy. Giant Lizards, Astrology, Queers That Cut Their Own Bangs and Find Family in One Another, Anti-Colonialism. It's a lot of fun. So one thing I'd love to start with in this conversation is kind of discussing teenage audacity. One thing that I think Rilla and my main character So Mang have in common a lot is that powerful teenage audacity that comes from not being listened to and feeling I don't know, like helpless in the face of a big circumstance. So I think I'd love to hear what sort of audacity and authenticity kind of means to you in YA as a genre.
Yeah, I mean, I think most of my other books are all adult, and what I love about YA is YA, to me, it's a power fantasy, for teenagers, and really within genre YA at least. You expect to see teen protagonists who, all on their own, or maybe with a group, maybe with a community, really have the power to change the world. And so how do you give them that power? How do you suspend your readers' disbelief enough to let them shape the world's events in these powerful ways? And I think that that's a really empowering message for young people to read. I think that's why young people love young adult genre fiction so much. And in terms of I guess what inspired me, it was just I was a teenage environmentalist in the early 2000s when most even liberal adults did not really even believe in climate change in my life. So that was challenging. So I just sort of thought of the book that I would have loved to see. And then also when I first got the idea for this book, I was teaching seniors in high school, and I was thinking about them going off to college and the types of experiences they might have and the types of literature that they were interested in, and just sort of their spirit and their belief that they could just, go out there and change things. That it would be that simple, which is kind of heartbreaking but you want to give them some books where like it is that simple and it is possible, because sometimes it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is also so interesting because while again, like the idea of like, it's like, if you do something, there can be change. If you organize, if you are not in like a vacuum, like if you are working with other people and feeling like there are connections, like so many things can change. Or I think about like, even in your book, there are so many challenges that come up. When you were planting seeds, of course, without spoilers and stuff coming in, how did you decide the degree of challenge? Like there's many challenges that can come up when you're dealing with a dystopia. Did you identify sort of certain themes or certain things you wanted to touch versus didn't want to touch when it comes to dystopia?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to touch on everything, which is why it was planned as a trilogy. But in this first book, I guess what I really wanted to focus on was disillusionment with the promised solution. Like Rilla and her friends are brought to the school and told by the powers that be that thought by following the status quo, so like being good students at this school and developing this technology, that they will save the world and that this university is like a force for good in the world. And there's like a disillusionment process happening over the course of the book, and that really scary moment, which I think is part of coming of age in the world. I was going to say the world today, but really I think the world ever, which is that actually, if you want to do any good in the world, you are going to have to break the status quo. And you are going to have to go against the institutions that are in power. And that's a very scary thing and a very scary place to be. So I kind of wanted that to be the focus of this first book in the series.
Yeah, I love that. I think I'm so excited to see what comes next. I'm also interested because you were talking about having it again, having a series, having things going. I'm currently 2 books into a trilogy. I'm exhausted. And you have written a lot of books. So I would love to sort of hear from a craft standpoint, just like a little bit more about how you wanted to structure this, and also like, how are you doing? Are you enjoying writing a series? Because I'm tired. I'm so close. I'm exhausted.
Yeah. It's okay. So from a craft standpoint, this was the first book I ever wrote. So
Really?
it's like, it's coming out as my 3rd book, but I wrote it like 6 years ago.
Wow.
So it was my first book, and I thought of the idea back in 2013. So I really didn't know what I was doing from a craft standpoint. I definitely wrote it in like by pantsing. I had nothing but vibes to go off of. I like didn't really know what the ending was going to be. And then I learned how to write a book by writing this book, and I rewrote it many, many times because I through the process of getting an agent, I actually had 2 different agents end up representing this book. Because I ended up switching one. Then my editor wanted to make lots of revisions. So I've probably rewritten it like this book like 10 times. It was like an incredible learning process.
Yeah.
But it is hard, and then when I sold the book as a trilogy, I had written the 2 synopses for the next 2 books. And I've written like the majority of the sequel to this one, but between writing this book and then writing the sequel, COVID-19 happened.
Yeah.
The January 6th and the resurrection happened. Like so much.
Just little things.
And when you're writing relatively near future dystopia, and then all these big global event curveballs comes your way, it's like it's kind of taking me back a step, and I'm like, oh gosh, I think I may need to rewrite those synopses that were what I had in mind 6 years ago about the future, and like rethink that. So still kind of waiting on a little bit of inspiration for and book 2.
No, that makes a lot of yeah. Yeah, no, I love that. It's funny. Two Dark Moons was my first book where I was like, I'm going to write a book, and it was done in response to an 8-year project, which was a dystopia. It was a secondary world dystopia. All of my pain and terrors of capitalism were fully in it, and I had written myself into a corner where I was like, I don't know how to solve these problems. I'm overwhelmed. I don't know what I'm going to do. And I tried to write Two Dark Moons as escapism, and lo, many of the problems still found their way in. But I sort of found that I was like, this is going to be hope punk. We're going to do this. Everyone's going to talk about their feelings and listen to each other, and it's going to work out. And it ended up becoming a really safe place to kind of explore. But I found again, when like the COVID-19 pandemic began, and the world just like everything that was already wrong was suddenly visible and inescapable in a way that was stronger than ever before. It became really interesting trying to engage somewhere, I guess, between what you are creating and what you're responding to. So it's interesting, I think, how books can become responsive. I would love to also know more, I guess, about, I don't know, when I think about the messiness of even like writing and working through things, I'd love to talk about messy characters and relationship dynamics, and basically the right to make mistakes. Because I think there's in a lot of YA I've seen, well, they didn't act perfectly. They were so annoying. I'm so angry that this 16-year-old made an impulsive decision. Like, I'd love to hear about your relationship to messiness for characters.
Yeah, when I wrote this, it's actually like it's not in any way autobiographical because it's like sci-fi and everything, but in some ways, like, it is very autobiographical about the experience of my freshman year of college. Just like in the way that I look back and like lovingly am like, oh my gosh, what a clown. Like, I made so many mistakes, especially when it comes to like romantic entanglements. And like Rilla, I was someone my freshman year of college who was just like falling in love with people at the drop of a hat. And it can be quite cringy to read that in a book when it's very earnest. But I hope that I did it with enough humor here that it's funny. And the reader is invited to sort of chuckle along at Rilla's sort of disaster heart. And also the way there's a lot, I don't want to again do spoilers, but like the way like every new situation she gets into, she just falls into it so hard, whether it's like dating a boy or going to like some new eco community and being like, this is the way. Like, Rilla is the ultimate cult mark. Like, at least at the beginning of this book, she's just that mark, you know, that you want to convert to your religion, and she's gonna just fall for everything. And I think a character like that, and watching them grow, I mean, there's so much room for growth for her, you know, because she's lived this incredibly sheltered life. She's just been around very few people because she grew up extremely in the middle of nowhere in this, you know, the western half of the United States is all desertified, and so like she just hasn't interacted with many people. And we know she's a reader, so she's read lots of books, probably has a bit of a naive, you know, trusting heart from that. I think reading too many books as a young person can make you think the world is nicer actually than it is. And then, you know, but she's learning over the course of this book. She learns a lot. I'm very uninterested in YA books where there's a lot of them. I don't want to, but like YA books where the protagonist is already like a seasoned, tough killer. And they're like 17. I just can't connect with that on any level.
No, that makes so much sense. And I don't know. I think I appreciate, like, I don't want to project anything onto any characters, but ooh, that young neurodivergent experience of like, now this is the thing. No, no,
Yeah.
this is the thing. This feels good. I'm in hell. Oh, like it's it's very I don't know, interesting seeing the way that that jump around can happen, and also just I don't know, the protection of that passion, like being willing to honor that character and be like, you're making mistakes, you're having a hard time, you're learning, and like, what if that's not a bad thing? Like, what if it's okay and allowed to just learn?
That's true. And I think that like there's Rilla really has this found family of other characters, and
Yeah.
like a real foil for Rilla is Magenta, who is sort of the like tough YA, like kicks
Mhm.
ass, takes
Yeah.
names character, and is very savvy about the world.
Yeah.
And they both sort of what they're able to accomplish over the course of the book, they wouldn't be able to accomplish without all of their different strengths. And like you
Yes.
need Rilla's naivete and passion and just
Yeah.
like charge in energy sometimes. And then just sometimes you really need someone who like understands context.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's huge. I think I would love to hear more about I don't know, like what forming like found family and community look like. Because I think found family, it's like the queerest theme there is out there. It's essential. It's healing. Like it's for many like queer and trans folks that the found family is like that's it. That's what you've got, and it's wonderful. But I'm curious about you because you started this book again like 6 years ago. How did you sort of build out that family structure as you were writing? Like how did you build these characters and sort of envision these connections?
Uh, it is hard to remember that part.
That's okay.
Why did I come up with the characters that I did? I wanted it is kind of a big ensemble cast
Mhm.
of Rilla's friends. I wanted it to feel like everyone had a role. I wanted it to feel like everyone had a really distinct personality and skill set. It's a way of world building because I really wanted to get people to have a big scope with this book of like how has climate change affected the whole United States. And also at this university, sort of what are all the different majors, what are all the different sciences people are interested in. So I think it was just like things like that that interested me. And then as I wrote the book, I do remember in early drafts feeling like, okay, there's a lot of characters and they're all sort of interchangeable, and I need to like figure out who each of them are and like,
Mhm.
give them agency in the scenes. But actually what was really fun about writing the sequel was that I feel like I know these characters so well
Yeah.
that getting into some of the hardest scenes are the ones to write where Rilla's in new situations with
Mhm.
new people. But anytime she's sort of like coming back to home base and back with her found family, those scenes are really easy to write because just sort of know how everybody interacts with each other and it comes very naturally.
Totally. I love that. I think I'm also I'm interested in thinking about, like this is we're in like a piece of eco fiction that is also like it's a dystopia, right? Like we're in the bad place. And I'm really I think a lot about the fact that we are in this world experiencing like ecological trauma. And again, like you've been involved in environmentalism since like you were like quite young. This is something that you've been aware of. That's something I remember being keenly aware of being quite young and saying, like asking my mom, like, what are we gonna do about this? And being like, oh, it's gonna be okay, like it's okay, and all the adults insisting, and now being a pretty gaslit adult who's like, so I've been worried about this since like several administrations back, and funnily enough no one what happened. And I think like we see a lot of different trauma responses in our own world to this, but I'm curious about what it was like building a world for you where I think in Seeds for the Swarm we see a lot of different trauma responses to an ecosystem that's suffering. And yeah, I'm interested in basically where those came from and what you were sort of hoping to navigate by representing multiple responses to a shared trauma.
I mean, sort of a lot of it's just again kind of autobiographical. I mean,
Yeah.
there are different things that I've tried to cope with. There's actually like a term I coined in the book because I wanted like a term for eco anxiety. Also, is I feel like most people have heard of it now, but 6 years ago, not so much. So I coined this like long German word that was coined by a German psychologist in the book called Gotterdammerangst, which is like angst of Gotterdammerung, which is like the end of the world. So angst about the end of the world. And so, yeah, the characters, you know, they're all dealing with climate anxiety in different ways. You see like entire little societies in the book and how they're dealing with it in different ways in terms of religion, just drug use, partying, trying to forget, trying to capitalize off of it, you know, trying to profit. Yeah, all those responses.
Totally. No, that makes sense. And in general, I'm curious, like, I think we've covered a little bit of this, but like in terms of why you're writing a, a fictional ecosystem and working with it. But I'd love to know how you went about actually creating one, because there's a lot of like world building intricacy that's like clearly been very like thought out and explored. Like, Chad, if you haven't read this book, please read it. But I'm really interested in what your sort of your world building touchstones were.
Yeah, well, so like the fictional ecosystem was like based on genetic engineering. So that was something I was sort of interested in terms of like the future tech of the book, the sci-fi elements of the book is as the world is desertifying and stuff, will we be able to use some kind of technology to, we're already, we've already genetically modified like some drought tolerant plants and things like that. So kind of just taking that to an extreme. And at the school, at the university that Rilla attends, there's sort of like these habitats where students are working on genetically engineering like all of the different components all of the different creatures in the ecosystem, like from scratch. And then there's one Theo, who's like one of my favorite characters, sort of like always teetering on the edge of mad scientist, and you're not quite sure if you can trust him, but he really wants to just be like, we should just be able to invent whatever we want with DNA and the code of life and just go hog wild with it. So yeah, I just honestly, I just like really had fun with that part because it's like the most sci-fi element and it was one of the most sci-fi elements. All of the future tech in the book is not necessarily supposed to be super realistic, like we're going to be able to do these things in 50 years, but more they allow the characters to explore some interesting moral situations, like ethical considerations, or they are useful to the plot.
Yeah. No, that's it. I think also like there's a lot of questions I think in there about, I think me and my partner, we talk a lot about how we engage with like the natural world and the difference between being like separated from it, with it, in it, or like a part of it. Like how how intertwined is it? And I feel like the questions of, again, genetic engineering are really exciting within this book, because like what's the degree of participation that's happening in your future? Like, are you participating literally on a genetic level? Are you participating by making a hell of a speech in a moment of frustration? Are you, I don't know, I think the participation aspect is really cool. And I don't know, creature connection. I'm thinking about forgive me for forgetting their names right now, but the little cicadas that are in there. Do you have any personal ties to cicadas that went into this?
Well, yeah, the superb green cicadas are the ones
Yes.
we have here in Texas. I mean, the tie is that just they're everywhere in the summer. And I love them, and with my daughter, well, my daughter was just a baby when I wrote this book, but it's been so fun watching her like find their little exoskeletons and finding the grown-up ones and understanding the life cycle of them. And they're very loud, very wonderful. I just think they're very large, beautiful, majestic, wonderful creatures.
They're so neat. They're so neat. I'm from like Western Massachusetts, before I moved up to Canada, and my dad, he was a little bit closer to Boston, and we had cicadas, but also cicada wasps. And watching the engagement between these creatures that would show up, and then these creatures that would hunt them, and then the birds, and then my father sitting outside being swarmed by massive bugs, yelling in his like Providence accent. Like it's like, wow, we're really in nature right now. Like it is everywhere. Like I don't know, I think it's cool tying into all those little creatures. This is very, very exciting. I'd also love to talk more about, like queerness and gender. That little all-pervasive guy. How does like speculative fiction give you space to explore gender?
So I wrote this book before I came out as non-binary, and
Mhm.
I was actually like, again, 6 years ago. I was I was like 31, and I literally was starting to hear the term non-binary for the first time in my life. Like I didn't know that existed.
Mhm.
And I had a friend who came out as non-binary, and I was actually really not good at using their pronouns. And I was like, well, let me write a character who's non-binary, because I think that will, like, I'll practice
Mhm.
writing their pronouns in the book, and then that'll
That'll help.
help me get used to it. And so that became magenta. And then as I was writing the book, I just like fell in love with magenta, and I was like, I want to be magenta so bad. Like that is who I am. Like I am non-binary. So yeah, writing this book and writing that character was like a major part of me figuring myself out. And that's why I'm really not ever interested in like witch hunts under the guise of own voices, purism when it comes to writing queer characters. I really think that whole discourse is very harmful, and people need to be able to explore in fiction people who are different from themselves. So.
Absolutely. And I think it's very interesting. I've had a little bit of a revelatory year where when I was first writing Cheater Moons, I have a character in it, Hay, who's my books have been described as Princess Mononoke meets How to Train Your Dragon. And Hay is sort of my Mononoke. And I wrote them and I'm like, a lot of people, my parents, for example, they read it and they're like, oh, you're clearly so. Like that one's so clearly you. And I'm like, of course that's the one you think is me. She's the obnoxious, frustrated teenager. Like that's who you raised. But Hay definitely was modeled a lot after, my partner, and more like private parts of myself that just sort of needed to operate in a way that felt really secure. And I remember one of my first readers who sort of went through it, came and was like, oh man, I love that Hay's autistic. And I was like, what? And they're like, yeah, like it's right. And I was like, oh, I'm so glad that you think Hay is autistic and that resonates with you. And then I got a message, they're like, hey, is your character autistic? And also are you? Because I want to like list it. And I'm like, I am a deceiver. I simply wrote Hay as they are. I will not claim this. I'm sorry to have infiltrated your community. And now I'm here like it's just a little, it sort of happened. And I think it's really, I don't know, I agree with you. I think it's really cool how the characters and the worlds that we engage with can be that like safe space to explore like what we could be and what we want, and to kind of get beyond the versions of ourselves that we've been assigned. Yeah. I think also regarding identity, I'm really curious about, do you feel like Jewish identity ties to eco-fiction for you at all?
This is my least Jewish book, probably, Seeds of Swarm. And now I'm writing some super Jewish stuff. So I'm like really I'm writing this like 17th century Jewish queer trans shtetl book.
Oh,
but
I would like that. Please,
yes,
call me.
coming. So okay, yes, in the sense of I think just being raised as a part of Judaism that was very much transmitted to me was like the idea of tikkun olam and like
Yep.
the repair of the world. Like as
Yep.
Jews, we're responsible for fixing the whole world.
Yeah.
So that has all like I feel like that must have been transmitted through my family to me, and that's why I've always been like the environment, y'all like
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I think that sensibility, I think the humor, I mean, there's humor in this book, and I don't think I can write something that doesn't have humor in it. Readers don't always necessarily pick up on the humor, but that's fine, especially if they're not. I feel like my ideal readers are always Jewish because they're going to be more likely to get my jokes and sort of the cadence of it. So, you know, dealing with tragedy with these moments of humor is a very Jewish thing. It's not an exclusively Jewish thing, but
but oh, how it helps.
Yeah. So I think those things, I think that Rilla's psychology, even though she's not, I didn't make Rilla Jewish because I honestly didn't feel Jewish enough to write a Jewish book when I wrote this. And it wasn't until I wrote To Part, which was 2 books later, although that was my first book that came out. All my books came out in a different order.
Yeah.
But To Part just like sold and then went to publication really, really fast. But that one, by that time I had the confidence to like write a book about like, it's about an insecure Jew who's insecure in his Jewishness. But I think that even though I didn't feel confident enough, like making Rilla Jewish, I think her psychology is like very Jewish because it's, you know, kind of a reflection of mine. I think the way that, again, she kind of takes on the responsibility of saving the world. I think like the sort of sometimes debilitating guilt that she feels when things don't go perfectly is very Jewish. You know, I don't know other things, maybe the way just she kind of talks and relates to other characters. I don't know. Other people might see it better than me, but yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's so, it's just so real the way it shows up without you meaning to. And again, I think I've been on a similar journey where I was like raised Jewish, made a couple choices that my mom wasn't thrilled about, and had some distance. And as I sort of came back, it was interesting finding that it's not, I don't want to say like, you know, it's inescapable because that makes it sound like a trap, but how there's moments of discovery, again, engaging with other Jews or reading through something, you're like, oh, there it is. Like, oh no, I have a character who missed a critical coming of age ceremony and now everything feels weird. I didn't get my B'nai Mitzvah until I was 15. And it was just funny where I'm there and I'm like, all right, this is a story about someone who missed their bat mitzvah and has a complex about it and is not going to stop until everyone gives her whatever she wants. And if you tell her she's too loud, she'll say, you raised me like that.
No, it's just fantasy.
Who could say?
Yeah, I think the further I get into writing and just growing older and just realizing how inescapable your Jewishness is and how much it defines you. And just deciding to lean into that, you know.
Absolutely. If you haven't, have you had the chance to read Jenna Rose Nethercott's Thistlefoot?
I am 200 pages into it.
How are you doing?
It hasn't grabbed me yet. So I'm good. But so many people have told me I'll love it.
Yeah.
It's just the characters aren't like, okay, I don't want to actually use this time to like, so many people love that. So I'm continuing to read it because I'm excited to see where it's going. So
yeah, I think it goes just from like with the themes to a place that's really similar to stuff like we've been talking about, which is exciting. I think, I mean, how much of Jewish identity in writing is being like, this isn't affecting me. The traumas of the ancestors, no, I don't feel that. Or even just, again, discovering the humor, I think is really, really special.
Yeah.
I'm also seeing we have a few questions from the audience, so I would love to turn it over to them for a little bit. If you are comfy. Oh, we have a bunch of them. Wonderful.
These are good
All
questions.
right, so we have for Sim, in writing a dystopian novel, what were some of the themes you knew from the onset that you wanted to stay focused on? I know you said there's a little bit of everything, but were there a few specific themes that kind of had your eye on the prize?
Well, like I said, the thing about, sort of becoming disillusioned with institutions of power, and then also not, as we were talking about, all the different responses to eco-anxiety and grief, not
Yeah.
giving into despair and continuing to fight, and sort of not offering like a phony motivational poster, just keep trucking kind of solution, but really talking very real, trying to, if like young people who read this book took anything away from it, like that is what I would hope, is that they would see, oh, here's a whole bunch of coping mechanisms people might use. Here's some that are really destructive.
Yeah.
Here's some that are not going to help anyone. And
Yeah.
here's how you take care of yourself and take care of each other and keep going.
Yeah, totally. I love that. There's also a question for Rex. Aside from your own work, what books would you recommend for other readers wanting non-binary characters?
Okay. Of course I'm blanking. Okay, the Murderbot Diaries. If you also like sci-fi, oh my gosh, love Murderbot. It was just the Trans Race Readathon, and I read so many books.
I'm like
non-binary
every
character.
book. Let me see. I'm looking at my shelf.
Looking at my pile. Did the Seep have a non-binary character? I'm trying to remember. Okay. Oh, I
can
really
also feel some while you look if you'd like. I just flash looked at my shelf.
Yeah. You start naming them, and I've probably read them. I just blank when I get asked to list books in an event like this.
You're
my mind
so good.
Screaming white noise.
No, you're fine. I see all of R.B. Lemberg's work, but I love the Four Profound Weaves, like lots of non-binary Jewish identity, especially with older characters, which is really exciting. Also, out a few years ago, but Neon Young's work, Black Tides of Heaven, Red Threads of Fortune, really phenomenal.
Did just read that and really enjoyed it.
It's so good. So really good. And then one of the first ones I ever read, actually, when I was sort of diving back into reading and getting excited, was Sarah Gailey's American Hippo, which is, I would argue, another piece of eco-fiction.
That's one of the few Sarah Gailey books I've not read.
It made me start reading again. Nice. It's so delicious.
Yeah, those are great recommendations. Pet, Akwaiki, Emazi. They're non-binary. There's non-binary characters in that, right? Oh, Finna, Nino Cipri. Finna. Also a very funny author, sci-fi author.
Yeah, really cool human.
Yeah.
All right, let's jump to the next one.
Those were both from the bookstore, so let's maybe go down to Amy's and Sarah's questions.
Yeah, let's do it. All right, so I'm seeing from Amy, for me, how's the third Sangi cycle book coming along, and should we expect it this year or next year? It's going to be next year. It's going well. I'm navigating my feelings about it mostly. The pressure of finishing it in exactly the way I want to is looming heavy, but it's really fun. I'm working with characters that I haven't gotten to work with, who I'm really loving, getting into some tasty sibling dynamics, and hoping to dedicate lots of time into it, especially in the coming month. So thank you for asking. And then I'm seeing from Sarah, what books or genres would your main characters read?
So I think Rilla would absolutely be a high fantasy girly. She would be reading high fantasy. Magenta would be reading leftist praxis. Jay, who's very much based on my spouse, would be reading repair manuals and so I don't know, only nonfiction, only extremely dry nonfiction. Same with Dee Dee would be the one reading the electrical repair manuals. Let's see. I think Azam would be maybe the best read of everybody, like very holistic reading. I feel like Azam dips into like fiction and nonfiction and just reads across the genres and very diversely. Who am I forgetting? Inez is like extremely, or not Inez. Yeah, Inez is would be like just extremely well read on like every single like piece of journalism that's come out lately that's relevant, like constantly reading whatever's new.
I love this. They're such good answers.
What about your books? Your main character?
I'm like, please don't ask. Oh God. I think So Mang would, funnily enough, be reading that kind of YA where it's like they're 17, but like no, they are 30. And they would be like, yeah, I'm really cool. I could take over a city. I could run this kingdom. Look at me. I could do it. I'm different. I think she'd be really lost in the sauce. That and cackling over very raunchy romance. Through and through. I think Hay would read poetry. A lot of poetry. I think I love poetry because it's like capturing a feeling in a bottle and distilling things that like big feelings and big experiences into something kind of exploratory, something that it doesn't tell you what it wants. In the same way as like some fiction does, it makes you kind of go and see what you want to get. And I think Hay would have a really good time with that. And then if you ask them what they'd like, they'd be like, I don't have to tell you everything. And I think this might be kind of a roast, but I think Anshan would read things marketed as upmarket women's fiction. I think he would be like, oh, it's a family drama. I think he'd read like Camlet of like, and she had a pie and there's an affair with her husband and what does it mean? What's the bear a metaphor for? Like, I think he'd read what I would consider kind of boring literary stuff and stuff my mom would like. And I love him. I love this 19-year-old prince of a difficult empire for his confusing reading habits. That's what I would say. All right. We have, and then in terms of back to us as authors, God bless. What are the pros and cons of YA? This is a good question.
What I'm having a hard time with is in writing the sequel is maintaining the requisite amount of optimism.
Oh, yeah.
Like, and like, because you got to give it a happy ending. And also just the power fantasy of it. When you're feeling so beaten down by the world, you know, and just everything politically you try to do, getting smashed to bits all around you.
Yeah.
Being a trans Jew in Texas, it is very hard to psych yourself up to write a book about teenagers who are going to fix everything. And I, you know, it's just, it's been hard. That's been the hardest thing for me about finishing the sequel. It's just like overcoming the weight of the world. Yeah.
That was a huge stalling point for me on Seeking Stars. Was trying to work with that. And even when it came out, it came out in like, you know, July 2020, that's sort of what it's like. It keeps going. 2021. And it was just, I'm like, here's a book. I promise things are going to get better. Like it was really tough to maintain. So just solidarity there. I think for me with YA, this is a very, I like kissing books. I like horny books, and these books cannot be horny. They are children. And so I think, and again, there can be desire, there can be love, but I don't want to necessarily be writing raunchy, like truly raunchy stuff in this one, though I think the idea of like purity in books makes me really like, not my thing. But I think I'm just in the mood to write a raunchy romance at this point in my life. And I can't do that with these books. So I have to wait and just hold my raunchy kissing book in my heart until it is time for me to give it to the world. So that's my battle.
My characters have sex, but they are in college and if you think that college freshmen aren't having sex, I mean, maybe they aren't.
Yeah.
I don't know. Some of them
That's
aren't.
fine. That's it. Yeah, mine are a bit younger, and I think like they absolutely do. But it's kind of a thing of like it's talked about, but it's not something that I would necessarily put in at the level that I like to write. But that's what I would say. And then there's one more question, which is for both of us. When you start writing a story, do you start with the story, characters, world, or something else?
I think it depends on the book. Although a lot of my books, I do get the world building first. I actually kind of know the themes. Actually theme is like the most important thing for me. It's like very wild to me that sometimes people write. Sometimes I read a book that got published and everything, and it's like, wow, I read this whole book, and I don't think anyone ever figured out what the themes was. Like, what's the point of this? Those books, me, I'm like an ideas person. I like, I really want some chewy. I want to walk away from a book with some chewy ideas. That doesn't mean it has to be like wrapped up in a neat little bow with like a moral of the story. It can be thematically messy. It can be thematically inconclusive, but I need the story to be like grappling with some of the big questions of our lives and of our times and of the human experience. So that's actually usually where I start. And then I get the world building and the vibes around it. And then figuring out character and plot is more of a sort of intentional sitting down with pen and paper and being like, okay, who are the people that can help me tell this kind of story?
Yeah, I'm so excited that you just said that because I've like not really talked to many people of the same answer as me. So I'm like, great, phenomenal. Where so much I think is what am I trying to write? Like what do I want? I think about I did a lot of theater in university, and one incredible acting exercise was after every line you say, am I getting what I want? And I think, am I getting what I want? Is there like, what's the theme? What do I want to be directed with? And what is the world that supports that theme? And who will fill that? And from there, the characters kind of like come up. I think plots that I forget to write plot all the time. It's just people talking with lizards, and then there's a lake, and then there's a little argument, and now it's okay, and then nothing happened. Like nothing happened. Rachel Hartman once said that her first draft of Serafina could be described as Ibsen with dragons, and that needed to be changed in edits. And sometimes I'm like, it's Ibsen with lizards.
I wrote this book. Remember, I pantsed this book and I didn't know what I was doing about writing it. After I wrote it, and I got a little bit of feedback from agents I was querying, I read Saves the Cat Writes a Novel after having written the entire book. And that was the first time I went back and like rewrote the plot. I very heavily rewrote it after that.
Yeah.
It's like, that's how you do a plot. And actually, I know, like, I went to, of course, that's one of those things they don't teach. Like, I went to school, my undergrad degree, I got a creative writing and English degree. Of course, they don't teach you anything about plot in a creative writing program. Like, no. Never.
I'm curious, actually, because I just had a little bit of a realization with myself, is before I was sitting down writing whole books, a lot of the writing I was doing was in text form RP forums and chats. So much of my experience and practice with writing before I was sitting down and doing long form fiction was character work and interactions and engagements and sort of those intimacies, which I think is sometimes why it's hard for me to remember to do plot, because I'm like, don't we just want to see them talk forever and be wounded and heal? And I'm curious, where did, like you said, you wrote this book as your first one 6 years ago. What was sort of your journey towards being like, it's time to write this book?
So like, when did I write it?
Or what made you choose to make it a book? Like at what point, like, what was it that made you go, I'm writing a book now?
So I got the idea for it in 2013. I was teaching seniors. There weren't any books about, there were no YA books about climate fiction besides like, I don't know, like Holes in middle grade.
Yeah, oh my God, Holes.
Sackar was doing this stuff. So there was
Stargirl.
Wow. Yeah. So there just wasn't any YA with talking about climate change, really. So I wanted to do that, and I kind of got the idea of the book, and I kind of sketched out a plot. I actually at one point like took a light, like took a pay cut to have a lighter course load because I was like, I can write this while teaching. No. I did write about like 20,000 words, and then I couldn't write and teach at the same time. So then I put it down for another couple of years, and then I ended up my daughter was born. I had like a real bad time of it, and I became disabled. I had to have multiple surgeries. I had to quit my teaching job, so I was disabled and unemployed, and I was like, and I had a baby, and so I started writing it while she was napping. But it was the same book. I guess the reason I knew I wanted to write it, I always wanted it to be a book. And because that's how I conceived of it. And I love books. And I wanted to write a book. My whole life, I wanted to write a book. And I just had the ability to go for it because of circumstance. Yeah. And it was like, I started writing it in 2017. And I had had the idea since 2013. So it had already been plaguing me for 4 years. And this idea just hadn't gone away. You know, it was just still in my mind all the time. Like, oh, that book I wish I was writing. I was like, it's never going to leave me alone. If I don't just actually do the thing and write this book, I'm just going to be tormented by the regret of not writing forever. So this was a book I just had to get out. So,
well, I'm glad it's out because it's a really incredible book. And
thank you.
I think if there aren't any other questions, we might be looking good. So I just wanted to say thank you so much again for joining and chatting.
You too.
Thank you so much, both of you, for making this event possible. Don't forget, everyone who are watching live right now, you can click the link below, take you to our website, so you can purchase both Sim and Avi's books and support them. Lastly, before we go, where can you both be found on social media so people can keep you be updated on if you found the optimism in your dystopia?
Everywhere. Sim Kern. I'm very annoyingly online. So I'm on TikTok, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. If you search Sim Kern in those places, you'll find me.
I'm on Twitter. You can find me at the Scream Bean on Twitter, where I post lizard pics, complain about how hard it is to find testosterone sometimes, and make memes of my book, or just memes generally. I'm just mostly being a demon. You can also find my publishing project that I run with my partner, the Shale Project, at welcometosHale.com, or on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook at Welcome to Shale.
I can't wait for the history class someday where we discuss like memes and times. That I look forward to that.
Oh, they are life-changing.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I hope you have a wonderful day, or if you're watching in the future, morning, evening, whatever. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.